Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything coming at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. In this video, we're going to be painting this Pak 40 anti-tank gun and crew. The Pak 40 was actually painted with Krylon's Deep Forest Green, and the crew were painted with Vallejo's Field Gray. And I noticed that when comparing the two, they're almost identical. So if you need a field gray, pursue that deep forest green. Okay, so I used a spray can, a rattle can, to prime all the figures. And when you spray from a top down or a side on, there is a potential that there will be missing or I should say gaps in the spray, because it'll be like under pouches or under like arms, or under your coat or something, and you might see metal shining through, because you're not always going to get a 100% coverage. So what I plan to do is take because remember, the troops are painted with Vallejo's Field Gray. I'm going to take the Vallejo Field Gray paint bottle, which is an exact match, and then I'm going to mix a little bit of water, not much, maybe about 25%. And I'm going to make it a little bit thinner. And then I'm going to do like a brush primer into those areas of the figures that need it. Now, I also have this Warlord German Army Field Gray. It is just a slightly lighter tone. It's actually really good for highlighting. All right, let's get this mixed up. We'll move on. All right, so now what I'm doing is I'm just putting it under. Now this is popsicle stick here is the crew for the anti-tank gun. So what I'm doing now is locating areas that might have been missed when I spray painted these using the Vallejo spray. Now, I will have to say, if I ever did a review of various different colored spray paints, I really like the Vallejo sprays. They cover extremely well. One thin coat, and well, I should say 2 thin coats, will completely cover your model. And I don't know how this paint does it, but it normally gets into the majority of all the different cracks and under boots, and not under boots, under pouches and arms and stuff. Usually there's not a whole lot of this fix-up that I need to do. If I ever use other paints like Rust-Oleum or Krylon, what winds up happening is I would have to maybe lay the model down and spray, or do what I'm doing now, and that's touching it up. All right, now that that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to that highlight color that I was talking about. What I'm going to use is the Warlord German Army Field Gray. Now, I'm just going to use this Grenadier as an example, but when you take a look at him, you can see how it's a little bit lighter tone to the Vallejo Field Gray. It's a little bit brighter. So basically what I do is I do a wet brush, which is meaning I get my brush with paint on it, and then I squeeze off the majority of it. And this is a stiff bristle brush, but instead of cleaning it off on the paper towel, I just drag it across the model, allowing paint to lay wherever it may. If it's a little wet, that's okay. I'm not going for a true dry brush. Okay, now with those highlighted, what I'm going to jump into now is flat flesh. This is model color flat flesh. It's a good mid-tone flesh. You can see that it's got a little bit of brightness to it, but it's also not as bright as like a light pale flesh or a highlight flesh. So it's like the perfect median, and I like it, and it's flat flesh. Now I'm painting on this Grenadier. I'm just showing you that we're going for a face and then the hands, and that's really all I need. I'm not even bothering so much with the back of the neck or the hairline, because it's so small back there that once you put a dark brown wash, it kind of disguises all of that anyway. So I basically just do the flesh and the hands. And I'm using this Grenadier as an example just because you'll be able to see exactly what I'm doing. Now there is a rule that I'm using when I paint this. A lot of times people call it like flesh outwards or inside out. But what I'm doing is something called harder to easier. So I paint something that's hardest, and which basically means it's underneath another color. And now with the crew all painted with their flesh, I'm moving on to a color called German Camo Beige. Now, camouflage helmet covers and smocks have a base coat of German Camo Beige, and there is one crew member here wearing a helmet, and he has a helmet cover, so I'm painting it initially with German Camo Beige. Now remember, I'm painting hardest to easiest, where usually you would consider a helmet to be an easy area to cover, and that would be one of the last things that's one of the last things you paint. But because it's going to be camouflaged, there's actually going to be multiple layers of color on that helmet cover. So I decided to go ahead and paint it now and then allow it to dry before we move on to any of the other camouflage colors, because the German Camo Beige is the base fabric color. All right, let that dry. We'll move on. And now we're moving on to the boots. Now their boots are combat boots. They're not the jack boots. So they are brown. So I'm using a German Camo black brown. So it's an extremely dark brown. So if you've got just a medium brown or something, you could probably add a drop of dark gray to it and darken it down a little bit. Avoid using whites and blacks for lightening or darkening your colors. Now I'm kind of showing off the gaiter here. There's a gaiter that holds the pant leg into the boot, and so what I'm using there is the highlight Africa Corps or Africa Tank Crew. It's also a Camo Beige, but it's really a highlight version of it. It's very light, and so we're going to paint that on there as a really dark contrast against the field gray pants and the dark brown boots. Also, at the end of all my paint jobs, I always put a wash on there, either a soft or a strong tone. And what that usually does is any light color that you put on there will darken down just a little bit with the wash. It's inevitable. So I try to use brighter colors than I probably should if I wasn't going to be doing the wash. But this basically balances out. All right. Yeah, so right now I'm just touching up on the gaiter, which is above the boot and below the pants, as you can see here. And that is also on the gun crew. Yeah, I showed me doing the Grenadier because I noticed when I was editing this that I had painted the gun crew off camera. So I figured at least you would get a chance to see me painting the Gators. And here, after realizing it, I decided to bring up the crew so that you could see the results of my Gator work. All right. And again, that was Highlight Africa Tank Crew. All right, now we're going to move on to the next color. All right, so the next color is the German camouflage black green. If there is a helmet like the man with the periscope, I am going to paint his helmet and the rangefinder with the camouflage dark green. If there was any mask canisters, or in the case of infantry, if they had like a machine gun barrel case for the spare barrel, I would paint those camouflage black green. For a long time, I thought that the helmets were supposed to be a German gray, like a dark gray. That will work, but I do believe that in the late war they started using these dark green helmets. I was actually able to acquire a Hungarian helmet when I was in Berlin, and it in fact was dark green. All right, now the next color we're going to do is on the anti-tank gun. There needs to be a base coat of the German camouflage beige. And so what I'm going to do is paint the gun shield and the wheels this camouflage beige. And you might notice I'm using the Panzer tank uniform because it's a lot brighter than the camo beige. Remember, I plan to use a dark wash on the anti-tank gun itself because of all the metallic parts, and because of that I wanted to brighten it up before I did the wash. Now you'll also notice that I put in some fluid medium, basically just to extend the color and thin it out just a little bit, because I didn't want any paint strokes on my gun shield. I wanted it to be smooth as a baby's bottom. I do use quite a bit of Liquitex, either matte mediums or matte fluid mediums, and also I use something called a flow aid. The flow aid actually turns your paint into washes. Basically it thins it down so much that it makes it runny, which is perfect for washing models. So you can take any color in your collection, use the flow aid, and make a wash. But in this case, I'm using the matte fluid medium. It basically is an extender to the paint. If your paint was getting extremely thin, you could add the fluid and it will thicken it up a little bit. Or if it's extremely thick, you can add some and it will thin it up a little bit. It basically brings it to the median, but that's not what it's designed for. It's designed to extend your paint. I just use it in both ways. Now I'm not painting the barrel or the trunnion or the legs. All I'm painting is the wheels and the gun shield, because those are the ones that I'm going to camouflage. There would be no problem at all painting the barrel or the legs, because those would have been camouflaged as well. So you can paint whatever you want. Now, I just would not paint the inside of the shield or the inner workings of the gun, where the breeches or the inner mechanical parts. I would just leave those as a field gray. I might even paint those with some metallics just to show their wear and where the paint has been worked off of the inner workings. But I do that later. I take basically a metallic dry brush to them. I don't think I show that on camera. So the legs and the inner workings, I give them a slight metallic dry brush, very small, just to give the hint that some of the paint is being worn off with use. All right, so once I get these legs and these wheels painted, I'll be right back. I think I just said legs and wheels. What I meant was the gun shield and the wheels. Now, actually, these wheels are actually hollow. Those are supposed to be spokes. So it wouldn't be inappropriate to paint in between the spokes with black. I just figured it's unnecessary. All right, so let's move on to the next color, and I'll be right back. All right, now we're going to camouflage those gun shields, and I'm using Luftwaffe Camo Green. It's a slightly darker green than any of the other greens. It's just a really good color when it comes to vehicular green camouflage. Also, some uniforms or some camouflage colors on Luftwaffe infantry. And I'm going to paint this into blotches. It's going to be a tritone. So we have the beige undercoat, and then we have the green and the brown are going to be in splotches on the gun shield. Okay. Mixing up some water with my paint, thinning it out just a little bit. Allow it to smooth good. If your paint ever starts to thicken up, especially the Vallejo ones, you can add a fluid medium if you have it. If not, you could add a few drops of water to ensure that it flows on your paintbrush. You don't ever want your paint to be too thick. It'll go on in clumps. And you'll have to force it off your brush, and that's damaging to your brush and makes your paint job look like crap. So you want the paint to just flow off of your paintbrush. And as you can see, I've already done the corner, and I'm just going to do this in blotches, and you can kind of see how it flows off my brush. And I'm leaving enough gap between the green spots to allow for maybe some brown, but also we want the camo beige to exist between the green spots. So it basically will give you, like, your green will have like this beige outline. All right, now the lower shield, the one that protects the trunnion itself, we're going to actually paint that as well. Now, on this trunnion, on this base plate, there is a shovel, and I'm ignoring it and just painting the camouflage pattern 100% over the entire plate. That way, later when I go back, I can paint the shovel. And remember, again, we're painting inside out or hardest to easiest. It's going to be easy to paint that shovel, so I'll paint that afterwards. Now, you'll notice that these blotches are fairly large. Well, that's because it's a vehicle. I consider anti-tank guns to be on the scale of a vehicle. So if it was a camouflage helmet paint camouflage or a smock, I would paint these about 1/3 or half the size that I'm painting on these trunnions and the wheels and the gun shield. Now, again, I'm just painting completely over the entire side wall, even where the gap between the spokes are. Again, you could always put like a drop of black, very thin black paint down inside there to fill the gaps between the spokes, giving you an illusion that it would be hollow. But I figured that wasn't necessary. All right, let's move on to the next color. Okay, we're continuing on with the camouflage pattern, the brown. I'm using camo medium brown for the gaps between the green. Now, I'm using a summer pattern where it's 2 green for every brown. So I will put these browns with the thought process that I want to put about half as much brown as I have green, but I also want to leave a gap between the green and the brown so that the camo beige will shine through and basically separate the colors. But if I see a spot that is blatantly empty of brown or it has too much camo beige, then what I'll do is I'll fill that spot. If while painting the brown, if I accidentally or intentionally touch the green, that's okay, right? It's okay to have a connected green and brown, like you see right there. Just be sure to try not to do too much brown so that the anti-tank gun doesn't look brown. You want it to look mostly green. So green and 2 to 1, green to brown. Filling gaps, leaving where possible, leaving a space between the green and the brown with the camo beige shining through as kind of like an outline or a highlight. And there we go. That's after a few seconds of highlighting it. Looks good. Let's put that down. And then we'll move on to the next color. All right, now this German Army Field Gray, which is the Warlord one. Remember, that's the lighter one, the one we did the highlight on their uniforms. I'm actually going to directly apply it to their soft caps. I have 2 crew members that have soft caps. And so what it does is it not only lightens it up, but it also covers any mistakes or accidents I might have made when I painted the flesh. And that's why you do the hardest to simplest, because you can cover up mistakes that you made, or you could just paint things. And they also call that inside out. So you paint from the inside and you work your way outwards. All right, so let me get these soft caps done and then we'll move on. All right, now the camouflage is still drying, we're going to move on to another step for the Germans crew. We're going to use leather brown to paint their straps and their belts. So basically all their load-bearing equipment, LBE, will be this leather brown. Different companies make different leather browns, but the model color leather brown is actually very dark. It is almost black brown, like the boots, but it's not. It's still a little bit lighter than the black brown. So a lot of people believe, and this is a misconception, that the straps should be black, and that's actually incorrect. When you're looking at black and white photos, yes, the straps look black, but in fact, if you go to any kind of museum, or if you go to any, you take a look at any of the replicas or whatever, they're all very dark brown. They've been tanned, or not tanned, dyed this dark brown. Now, that's not to say there aren't some units like SS or whatever that actually use black on their leather. But when it comes to the field combat leather straps, it's almost always, on all units, dark brown. All right, so let me go ahead and get these straps done. What I'm doing is I'm doing their little Y strap on their back, and then the two straps that go over the shoulder down to the belt. And then I did the belt itself. I'm not doing ammo pouches or anything else. Now, the reason why I'm doing the belt and the LBE is because it's the next layer up from their jacket. So I did their jacket first, and now I'm doing the belt, and then I'll do anything attached to the belt afterwards. All right, so let's get these done, and I'll be right back. All right, now speaking of that, what we're going to do next is paint this German camo pale brown on their canteen covers. The canteens are aluminum inside their canteen covers, but the cover itself is made of like a suede leather that absorbs water pretty well, holds water, and becomes wet. And by soaking your canteen cover in water, the process of it drying actually keeps the water inside your canteen cold. So that is actually like a brown, a very undyed leather. So I use the pale brown. All right, let's get these canteens painted. Now, I'm not painting the canteen cup. That comes later. Okay, now on the back of these guys, I mentioned earlier that I'm using the camo black green, and I'm using that for their mask canister. And you notice I didn't paint it when I was painting the other black green, because I knew that I had things under the canister that I needed to paint first, i.e. the belt and straps. And so now I'm painting this canister afterwards, because I'm working from inside to out. All right, so let me get these canisters painted, and then I'll be right back. Okay, now we're back at the gun itself. What we're going to do is we're going to paint the rubber that is on the outer side of the wheels. And guess what? I'm using a color called Tire Black. Now, it's a Model Air color, so it's built for air brushes, but there's no reason why you just can't use it. Just understand it is a much thinner paint because it's built to go through an airbrush. But that doesn't stop me from using it as a brush-on paint. In the past, I would use like a gray color, a dark gray, a German gray, but this Tire Black seems to have a little bit of, I don't know, it's gray, but it seems to have maybe just a smidgen of brown mixed in with it. I don't know, it's a perfect rubber color. I like it. Okay, so now understand that these wheels have like a solid rubber rim around the outer edge, and you got to get not only the outside, but you got to get the sides as well, because there's a little lip of rubber that goes to the wheel itself. All right, so let me go ahead and get these rubbers painted, and then I'll be right back. All right, now that they're painted, you get a little close-up view of them. See how that rubber goes along the outer edge, but I also did the inner edge as well. All right, next color. All right, now what I'm doing now is I'm using this black gray color. I'm using black gray because when it comes to 28 millimeter models, I don't like using black or even white because it makes it's too dark or it's too light. It makes too big of a contrast. But this black gray is perfect. It's just a very subdued black. And I'm painting the rifle like the Car 98 ammo cans, but I'm also painting his holster with this black gray. And if I see any ammo cans, or not ammo cans, but ammo pouches, I would paint those as well. With the gun crew, there's two things that are brass. Basically, this one model is holding a shell. It attaches directly to the back of the anti-tank gun. So I'm painting the back side, the part that he's gripping, I'm painting that brass. All right, and then we'll move on to the next color. Now I'm using gunmetal gray. This is going to go on a couple of different items. This is going to go on a canteen cup, which is at the top of your canteen at your belt. Also, if there are any mess kits, I'll paint them. If there's any weapons like rifle barrels or anything like that, I would paint those as well. And this last soldier there I'm painting now has a shell in his hand. I paint that brass as well. I go back and paint it brass because it looks like I overlooked it. And then I use a very light dry brush for the anti-tank gun itself with the gunmetal, just giving it a little worn look as well. All right, so let's go ahead and jump past that, and we'll go on to the next step. Okay, with all the metals added, the little dry brush on the anti-tank gun, and the second shell on the crew, I'm going to use soft tone to cover the crew, and the gun. I was trying to decide if I'm going to use the soft tone or if I want to use a strong tone or maybe even a dark tone. But I decided that I'm just going to use soft tone over the entire model, the crew, and the gun. And then once the wash is fully applied and dried, I glue everything together onto a single base, and here's what it looks like. We've got our anti-tank gun. Now, if you look at the observer with his periscope or his rangefinder, you can see his left arm is up, and it's on the leg of the anti-tank gun. And if you look at the guy leaning just to his left, he's got that brass shell in his hand, and he's either shoving it into the breech or he's pulling it out of the breech. My understanding is you shove it into the breech and you allow the breech ejection mechanism to throw the shell on the ground behind you, and that's why there's like this little tray to allow the gun shell to, or like a groove behind the gun shell, so that it won't like hit you, it'll slide past you and land behind you. not burning you, because I believe it's hot and would burn you if you were to hold on to it. And you can see the loader in the back, or I should say just the ammo bearer in the back. He's holding that brass shell. And then you see the third man behind the gun shield, just ready to maybe pull the lanyard to fire the cannon. Yeah, the base was flocked and everything's good. So tell me what you think, if you like it. If you don't, if you would have done something different. The wash really brings out all the details. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming out and watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.